We all know that feeling, right? That perfect piece of cake. It's rich, it's tender, it just melts in your mouth. And the secret to that texture, usually, it's butter. Lots of butter, which, is packed with saturated fat. For ages, it's been this trade-off. Do you want the delicious cake or the healthy option? But what if that's a false choice? We're about to explore some really cool food science that isn't just making cake healthier, it might actually be making it better.
So, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll talk about the real problem with butter in the first place. Then we'll get into the science of a healthier fat substitute. After that, it's time for a bake-off, where we'll look at the batter and, of course, the final crumb. And finally, we'll ask the big question: what does this mean for the future of baking?
Okay, so to really appreciate the solution, we've got to understand the problem. What is it about butter that makes it so perfect for a cake? And why is that perfection such a headache for our health?
I mean, this is the holy grail for food scientists, isn't it? We all want to eat a little healthier, cut back on the bad stuff, but nobody wants a sad, dry, dense cake. The real challenge isn't just to replace something like butter, it's to replicate what it does perfectly and, hey, maybe even improve on it.
And here's the real crux of it. The problem isn't just fat in general, it's solid fat specifically. To get that light, airy cake structure we all love, you need a solid fat like butter to trap tiny air bubbles when you cream it with sugar. But that solid structure comes from saturated fats, which we're all trying to avoid. And you can't just pour in a healthy liquid oil instead. Trust me, you just get a dense, greasy mess. It's a real baking paradox.
So if traditional solid fats are unhealthy and liquid oils ruin the texture, where do you go from there? Well, this is where science gets really clever. Researchers have come up with an amazing solution called an oleogel.
So what is an oleogel? You can think of it as a little bit of food science magic. You start with a healthy liquid oil, like sunflower oil, which is great for you but terrible for cake structure. Then you introduce a gelling agent. In this experiment, they used natural wax from the very same plant, sunflowers. This wax creates a microscopic crystal cage that traps the liquid oil, turning it into a stable, solid, spreadable fat that looks and acts a whole lot like butter.
And the process to make it is actually pretty straightforward. You just heat up some sunflower oil, dissolve a little bit of that sunflower wax into it, and then add one other very special ingredient, an emulsifier, which we're going to talk a lot more about in a second. Then you just let it cool down, and that liquid oil transforms into this smooth, solid gel.
Okay, so the scientists have their healthier butter substitute. What's next? The ultimate test, of course, a bake-off. They made a whole bunch of cakes to see how these new oleogels would perform against good old-fashioned butter.
So this was the lineup. First, you have the control cake, made with 100% butter, the classic. Then, you've got 4 other cakes that use the new oleogel, either replacing all of the butter or just half of it. But the really important thing to watch here is that little detail in parentheses, the emulsifier. They tested 2 different types, one called S80 and another called T80. And as you're about to see, that tiny difference, well, it changed everything.
Now, what's really fascinating is that even before they baked a single cake, the scientists could see a difference just by analyzing the batter. They found that the secret to a better cake actually started right there, with the choice of emulsifier.
This is where it gets really good. The key difference was whether the emulsifier was hydrophobic, meaning it feared water, or hydrophilic, meaning it loved water. The S80 emulsifier was hydrophobic, and it created a batter with big, clumsy, uneven air bubbles. But the T80 was hydrophilic. It loved water, and that property allowed it to create way more air bubbles that were smaller, more uniform, and much more stable. And any baker will tell you that fine, even bubble structure is the secret to a beautifully tender cake.
But the T80 oleogel had another superpower. It fought toughness. In a cake batter, fat is supposed to coat the flour to stop too much gluten from developing. That's what keeps a cake tender instead of chewy like bread. Well, the analysis showed that the T80 oleogel was actually better at creating this protective barrier than butter was. It was basically a super shield against toughness.
And you don't have to take my word for it. The study itself says it perfectly. The T80 cake crumb showed a homogeneous distribution of smaller air cells supporting its softness. What that means in plain English is that it had the perfect inside structure, a scientific signature that basically screams, this is an incredibly soft cake.
The batter looked incredibly promising, but the real test is always in the eating, or in this case, the scientific analysis of the final bake. So how did the cakes actually turn out once they came out of the oven?
Okay, this is the moment of truth. Using a special machine, the researchers measured the physical hardness of the cakes. That first bar, that's the hardness of the regular butter cake. The second bar is the cake made with the T80 oleogel. And the result is just staggering. The oleogel cake was significantly less hard. It wasn't just a good replacement for the butter cake, it was noticeably softer.
So when you put it all together, the T80 cake was a home run. It had a softer texture. It was less hard and chewy. It had that beautiful uniform crumb structure. It was more moist and tender. And on top of all that, it had a much healthier fat profile. The oleogel didn't just stand in for the butter, it actually beat it.
So what does all this really mean? This isn't just a neat little experiment. Research like this could point to a totally different future for all kinds of baked goods. The biggest takeaway here is that we might be able to re-engineer the foods we love for the better. By really understanding ingredients down to the molecular level, science can create healthier options that aren't a compromise. In fact, as this study shows, we can create something that is both healthier and has a better texture than the original.
It sounds kind of funny when you say it like that, right? But this research shows it's a real and really delicious possibility. It's just a powerful reminder that the future of food could be healthier, tastier, and way more innovative than we ever thought possible.